So Matt, there that made a response to my video yesterday. Actually, it didn't. Honestly, it didn't feel like that much of a response because it seems like he was responding less. He wasn't really responding much to what I was saying, so much as responding to the authors and philosophers that I was bringing up, that I was citing, and and so like he brought up David Bohm, and I mentioned Bohm just to give credit to him for this word that I was using, structation, which I got from his word structate. Now I'm not arguing for his whole theory of implicate order. I mean, I think there is some. I think there's something like the implicate order in the sense of. I mean, I think it's sort of in Whitehead in the kind of the sort of objective immortality that he talks about of the past, which I see in terms of like Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance, or Henri Bergson's idea of the closed past, and even Ervin Laszlo has a similar theory called the Akashic Field theory, which is there's sort of an imprint that is the eternal past that is fully present. So I believe in that kind of implicate order as a kind of plenum from which to draw, but yeah, I don't believe that the future is completely fixed. However, I while I don't believe in the whole like block universe idea, I also can't quite sign on to Whitehead's idea that that the future just doesn't exist. I actually think that it's a matter of degree rather than a kind. I think that the difference between Henri Bergson talks about in Matter of Memory that the difference between present and past is the present is causally open, whereas the past is causally closed. And even that, I think, is not an absolute, because there are experiments like the quantum eraser experiment that show that the retrocausality could actually exist, at least at the quantum level. But for the most part, we would say that the past is causally closed. We can't, our actions now wouldn't seem to change the past. Although it's possible they could, and we wouldn't know it because our memories would be different. So that's actually an interesting concept. But anyway, as far as the future, I think there's a becoming of causal closure over time, that events in the future become gradually more fixed, and then what we think of as the present moment, and relativity shows that there is no absolute present. There is no that time is not. There is no simultaneous presence for all things in the universe. Time, it seems to be relative to the observer and relative to space. But what we think of as the present, this flow of time that we experience, is the sort of the rate of causal closure reaching this kind of critical mass where things were open and now they're closed to us. But I think the causal closure that exists in the future, I think that things become more and more causally closed as they approach the present. So I think that one thing that's actually kind of changed my view on this is this affected my view is actually some of the experiments that have gone on in precognition, which of course a lot of hard-nosed material skeptics dismiss any kind of psi phenomenon anyway. But it was actually interesting to me when I saw a video of Rupert Sheldrake speaking to the Center for Process Studies. And it was interesting because the Center for Process Studies, they were all applauding him for all the research he was presenting on other psi phenomena like telepathy and remote viewing and all those other side things. But when he gets to precognition, there were mountains of objections and people trying to say, oh no, it's just possibilities you're seeing, and that's it's so funny to watch people struggle to find any possible objection to something that doesn't fit in their metaphysical system. And of course, it's funny to me because Whitehead's system is more open to a lot of these things than than the predominant materialist metaphysics. Whitehead's system has room for telepathy and other side phenomena, but the idea of precognition implies that there's a future that is already there, which they can't allow, their system can't allow for, and it is just so funny to me to watch this kind of cognitive dissonance for them. So for me, I think. I don't think that it has to be a block universe in order for the future to be at least partially set. Partially, there's a kind of infrastructure of the future that is already led, and things can be built. They can change direction possibly, but there is a kind of concrete future in some degree. And so I think that. While Matt didn't seem to address a lot of my points directly, I think what he was trying to get at is he was saying that Whitehead's system is not in need of improvement. It doesn't need to be improved upon, and that's our basic area of disagreement. Is I think that it does need to be improved upon. And also, I agree that Whitehead is not quite the relationist that Harman quite makes him out to me. But I think the sort of process, the atomism of his system, the sort of actual occasions that are sort of the concrete, real things in the system. I do have a problem with that, and I think he talks about societies of occasions, as this, in what he calls enduring objects, but they're not really enduring objects, for them. They're abstractions. They're they're a set of succeeding actual occasions. And the thing is, I can point to societies of occasions. I can point to enduring objects, but I've never seen a Whiteheadian actually be able to point to an actual occasion. Actually describe what an actual example of an actual occasion. And it seems to be kind of a meaningless abstraction to me, and so that's why I prefer to think in terms of structations, which are which can range in their duration. An actual occasion, it could be a momentary event, a quantum particle flickering in and out of existence, but it could be a table or a chair or me or this or the Earth or the sun or whatever. So I mean, these things, they're processes. They endure and change over time. But for me, they're not simply an abstraction of several different actual occasions that simply inherit the past. I think it's not. Their past is like inherently part of them. Their past self, what is their present self? It's their present self having undergone change. And so what I was getting with the structation idea is actually this idea of I wanted to get at a kind of non-duality of object and process. The object is undergoing process, and the process is also producing object. So it's objecting, so to speak, structating, in other words. So that's kind of the main objection I have. Now, Matt mentioned God in Whitehead's system, and I think that's, for me, is actually the most appealing part of Whitehead's metaphysical system. And he talked about Whitehead's idea of creativity. Now, I actually think that as far as creativity goes, Stuart Kaufman's ideas actually have a lot more bearing on creativity. When Stuart Kaufman talks about Boolean networks and this sort of emergent mirror of what he calls the adjacent possible, they relate to one another and then create a new level of emergence, which creates a new set of possibilities, and these possibilities keep expanding and expanding, so that the further you go, the more open the universe becomes, and that so they can never exhaust its possibilities. And so I think that's an essential thing. And Stuart Kaufman actually calls this ceaseless creativity God. He says it's mysterious enough, it might as well be called God. And I don't quite agree with that. I think I actually kind of agree a little bit more with Whitehead in his whole idea of the primordial nature of God. Except I think of it as sort of an attractor. I think there's a kind of center within. I mean, because as Whitehead said, that creativity in the wrong, out of season or in the wrong place is evil, and so I think that creativity in itself is not necessarily something we're celebrating. There's a kind of sweet spot within creativity, which I like to use the word logos, which is which has a long history in Western tradition. It's very prominent in Christian tradition. But I think an Eastern word for it would be Tao. There's a sort of, in a sense, it's within everything, but it's also this kind of center that things go wrong when you try to deviate from it, and to finding that center is where the is sort of where you connect with that divine perfection, or what the Egyptian called Ma'at, or what in Vedic tradition is called Dharma. There's that kind of center where you kind of strive toward it, and because it sort of leads creation. It's kind of like Teilhard de Chardin's omega point, so to speak. It's an attractor, so to speak, and I think that kind of emerges with the cosmic creativity. So I think of, and of course that's of course the logos is in Christianity the immanent nature of God. So by positing the immanent nature, I also posit a transcendent nature which is beyond our ability to grasp and our understanding. So the idea is that kind of attractor point. There's that is sort of aligned with the logos. That is kind of how I conceive of divinity, and so in a sense, I actually agree a little bit more with what about God being in an eternal actual occasion, although I don't really like that language. I think God is that attractor that is. It is this attractor that moves creation forward, but there's also what he calls the consequent nature of God, where God feels all of creation, God internally experiences all of creation, and I think that too, that for me is part of what I call the Akashic field. It's the resonance. I think that there's a kind of collective memory that is also part of that logos, and that I think is that I kind of designate as the Holy Spirit is that indwelling connectedness we experience. So I guess I'll leave it there. Peace.